So Amy, do you know who all is on the panel that I need to pin? Anybody? Bueller? I can look it up on the website if not. You're muted. Admittedly, I have the power to unmute you if you need assistance.
I am not the, I am okay with websites, but I am not the Zoom guru, but I'm logging in to see who's on.
Oh, hi. Was that your question?
That was my question. Do you know who's on the panel? Are you on the panel?
Yeah, it's me, Eleanor Coons, Nancy Billio, and well, Mally. Mally's
Mally.
going to be Mally's the moderator as well.
Okay.
Mally Becker. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Chris.
Jacqueline. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm great. You really kicked it with your book launch and your fund drive, so to speak,
Yeah.
for the animal shelter. That was wonderful.
Yeah, $1,852. So
Nuts. That's nuts. That's really great.
we were fortunate. We found actually a regular donor to Whiskers saw what we were doing and offered to basically match. So that's what drove that number up. So
Wow, that's
the last,
awesome.
yeah, the
A
last night I
matching
got a phone
donation.
call. Yeah, it was great. So
Good for you.
and thank you for being part of that too.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything. Did anybody have a winning bid for my book?
I thought, I'll check in, but
Yeah.
I thought we did.
Yeah.
I
When you get a
sent out
chance, 'cause
emails to everyone. So, but yeah,
I've
I'll
got
go
my
on.
book and I've got the envelope and I'm like, I'm going to send it right away to
I
whoever.
could have sworn yours did, but yeah.
We'll see. Hi, Mally.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Great.
Good. It's good to see you.
Chris, we confirmed at the business meeting we just had that there's no Saturday Saratoga Springs book thing this year. They're not doing it.
Saratoga Book Fest?
They're not doing that Saturday thing. They're just doing a banquet, which you have to pay $60 to go. I don't know why anyone would go except to just say, I love Saratoga, but it's of no use really. If you want to like network or sell books. I mean, maybe if you feel like it, sure. Saratoga's a beautiful city.
Yeah. Hey, does anybody have an in with know who the organizers of the Albany Book Festival are? Because it would be nice to pitch a mystery panel.
I agree. I'll help you with that. Like, I would love to do that. Last year, I know they had a huge controversy that blew up in the national media, and so maybe they're proceeding slowly this year. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
chat with Frankie Bailey. She may know.
That's a great idea.
She's closely associated with the university. But it seems like we ought to be able to dig up an old email about our acceptance letter. There was an organizer of that. I can try to find that for you. Let me put that in my notes.
I've never gone, so I don't have any history with them.
I'll forward that to you.
I have a vague recollection Carol knew the organizers too, but that's just a vague recollection.
She's going to be at Malice too. Maybe we can talk to her about it. Hi, Eleanor.
I can't see Eleanor. There she is. Sorry, I don't have a book line study. We live in a small house and my kids live with me and this is the best. I
Well,
tried to
a
come up with one of
picture-
those fake backgrounds. I thought, and then it looked like a cartoon character. It didn't
True,
work.
true
so.
confessions. If I turned this camera around, you would see what a mess this room really is. I have one
Right here.
corner that looks organized. That's it.
I got scolded by Janet because if I do this on my desk, you see my closet.
That's my
So she
closed
scolded
closet
me.
door
So
behind
now
us.
I have to do it with my computer on my ironing board. So
This
If
is
anybody heard gnawing, it's Duncan in order to keep him quiet. He's chewing one of those fake rawhides, so it does sound like something is going on behind me.
well, I think you just gave me an idea for a blog post
Yeah.
on Zoom backgrounds. And
I have a small house with 4 people living in it. I don't have a study. It's just what it is.
where
I
do
write
you
at the
write,
kitchen
Nancy?
table, or literal laptop on my lap and on the couch in the living room. I know it's pathetic, but in New York City it was even more so. They had
Well,
even
I
less-
write at the dining room table too.
Oh,
even
okay,
though
good.
it's
I don't know if
supposed
that's so
to have an
bad.
office.
Valley, what I think, because Jenna is going to pin our panelist, so I don't really need to say anything at the start when we're ready to begin as moderator. If you want to just go ahead, let me know when you're ready for the drawing. I have the random number app that you and Ellen had worked with, and I'm going to go and poke and get the registration list, and so we'll be able to use that
You
too
want to use
when the time is right.
for the
Just
attendee
let me
list.
know. The attendee list. Yes.
and can I ask a favor at around 11:45? Can you remind us all to stop talking so we can take
Absolutely.
questions?
Sure.
That would be great because I have a feeling the 4 of us could go on for quite a while.
I'm looking forward to hearing all
Okay.
of you. As I said, our house, my parents, my brother, everybody read historical mysteries, although at the time some of them were historical, which is sad, indication of how old I am now. But yes, some of them were at least in the Victorian age, which I can say I do not remember personally, but
I think let's give people one more minute and then literally start at 11:18, because so all of the people here are on time and I want to respect that.
Mhm.
But I'll say before we start that when you asked if I would moderate this, it was easy to say yes because I'd already read books by Nancy, Chris, and Eleanor. So it was much less work than it might have been to come up with questions.
Now we're getting nice hellos from people all over the country. That's
Mhm.
nice. Hello back.
That's great. Yeah, Seattle, Vermont. Okay, I think we're gonna start. So Liz, you're doing something to the view, or should I just get going?
please just get going. I'm just setting it so we can see everybody. I just lost Eleanor.
I'm here.
Well, then I'm going to start by thanking everybody for coming on this holiday Saturday morning. We really appreciate that you're here to listen to some of the best, most fun historical mystery authors talk about how we all do what we do. And I'm going to start with introductions. So Eleanor Kuhns is the 2011 winner of the Minotaur Mystery Writers of America First Crime Novel Prize for A Simple Murder. And since then, she has written 11 more Will Reese mysteries. The 12th one, The Long Shadow of Murder, will be released May 15th. She is also the author of the Bronze Age Crete Mysteries, In the Shadow of the Bull and On the Horns of Death. A lifelong librarian, Eleanor lives in upstate New York with her husband and dog. Chris Kiefer began her writing career with a weekly birding column for Schenectady's Daily Gazette that lasted 20 years. She's moved on to write short stories, humorous rants, essays, travel pieces, and the Carrie Lisbon Historical Mystery Series. Her debut novel, No Comfort for the Undertaker, was launched in 2022 to wonderful reviews, featuring a woman undertaker in the year 1900 in upstate New York. No Comfort was followed by Tragedy's Twin in 2023 and Find Your Way to My Grave in 2024. Chris recently retired from a school aide position and is now enjoying unlimited writing time, birding, metal detecting, and 4 grandchildren, perhaps not in that order. After working for publications ranging from Rolling Stone to Good Housekeeping, Nancy turned to fiction. She's the author of the Joanna Stafford trilogy, a trio of thrillers set in Henry VIII's England, and the Genevieve Planche novels, The Blue, The Fugitive Colors, and The Versailles Formula. I've read them all. They're great. She drew on her heritage to create a Huguenot heroine. Nancy is a direct descendant of Pierre Billiot. I'm probably butchering that.
No, that's good.
Okay, a French Huguenot who immigrated to what was then New Amsterdam, aka New York City, in 1661. So welcome. Oh, and me. I'm Mally Becker. I'm the author of the Revolutionary War Mysteries, each of which has been nominated for an Agatha Award. I'm a retired, and sometimes I say recovering attorney, who turned to writing full time after my first book came out. And we're all happy to be here. So let me start out by asking each of you for what's called in the publishing business an elevator pitch, a brief summary of your latest book. And Eleanor, I'm going to start with you. Pick whichever series you like.
Well, my newest book is Will Reese, The Long Shadow of Murder. So I'll start with that. And in this one, a body is discovered right outside the Shaker community of Zion. And of course, suspicion immediately follows on the Shakers. But Reese, who has a very close association with that community, doesn't want to believe it. And the victim had several traveling companions, his wife, his sister-in-law, his brother-in-law. So Reese turns his attention to them first. And then, of course, there are several more murders. So the pool of suspects expands. And it turns out that the seeds of this murder were actually back in the Revolutionary War.
Eleanor, what year does this book take place in?
It takes place in 1800.
Okay, thanks. Chris, what about you?
So my latest novel is Find Your Way to My Grave. It is the third in the Carrie Lisbon mystery series. Carrie is a woman undertaker, and the year is 1900. Carrie is not only an undertaker, she's an embalmer, she's a florist, and she takes photographs of the dead. This is a Victorian style, upstate New York, gritty historical mystery. I like to call it a classic whodunit in the horse and buggy days.
Great. And Nancy, congratulations. Your latest
you.
book came out
Came out
a day or two
2
ago.
days ago. Thank you. The Versailles Formula is set in 1766. Main character is Genevieve Planche, a French Huguenot refugee living in England. And the novel opens, she's living in the countryside with her husband and son, and is drawn into an assignment using her skills as a spy from a few years earlier, and has to discover the secret formula to a blue pigment that is so sought after and so prized and so controversial that if she fails, it could lead to escalating tensions between France and England. And in so doing, she learns a lot about herself and her marriage and what she really wants to do with her life. That's it.
Thanks. Normally moderators don't talk about their own work, but Liz asked me to include myself in the discussion. So I'll just add that my latest book, The Paris Mistress, features my two series characters, Becca Parcell and Daniel Alloway, who have been spies for George Washington during the Revolution. In this book, Becca is eager to reach Paris to marry Daniel, who's gone ahead to take a position there. But their idyllic prenuptial life is threatened when they accept an invitation to live temporarily with Benjamin Franklin, our American ambassador to France. Franklin receives a letter offering a bribe to help England, and then a suspect in that bribery letter is found dead at Franklin's house, and Becca and Daniel are off to the races, so to speak. So anyway, thank you all. So the next question, there's a famous 19th century historian, Thomas Carlyle, and he wrote that, and I quote, "The history of the world is the biography of great men, but we all write stories about the rest of us, the other 99%. So why did each of you choose or create your main character?" And this time I'll start with Chris.
So one of the tenets of writing a murder mystery is that, well, especially a series, is that your character has to be in a position where they encounter the murder mystery. They have to encounter dead bodies. And I thought, well, who better to do that than an undertaker? That's their business. And, you know, I really like this time period. It's tangible for me. It's we're only 3 generations removed from the year 19. Well, I'm only 3 generations removed from the year 1900. And you know, when I say Victorian era, many people think Gilded Age. But what draws me to this character and the setting and the people in the story is that this is the other 99%. This is not the rich and famous. These are not the extravagant people. These are my characters are workaday people. They're farmers. They're law enforcement. They're undertakers. They're bakers. They're farmers. You know, and some of them don't have electricity. Most of them don't have electricity. Most of them don't have phones. This is a rural setting. And, you know, it's got a great deal of appeal to me. And while the Gilded Age is extravagant, the places I'm writing about are not. You know, it's not Little House on the Prairie, but it is those old-fashioned main streets that you see. They're old-fashioned horse and buggy dirt roads, lots and lots of farms. So that's really, that has such an appeal to me, that particular time period. And that's why I write about that.
Yeah, thanks. Just curious, did you grow up in upstate New York? Is that where
I
you've
did.
always been?
Yep, I did. And it's a classic write what you know idea. We also have a great deal of Amish in our community. And so I'm always checking out their horses and buggies. They must think I'm weird. I'm not staring at you. I'm staring at your horse and buggy because I want to know how that sounds. I want to know how that works. I want to know how you hitched up your horse. It's research right there in my own backyard driving by. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nancy, same question. Why did you choose to create Genevieve?
Well, she was sort of engineered as someone who would be good for my plot because I came up with the idea to do a spying story first, set in the porcelain factories of Europe in this time where there were a lot of people stealing employees, stealing formulas. The rivalries were quite vicious, believe it or not. I mean, I got the idea for this whole series when I was on a tour of Hillwood in Washington, D.C., and the tour director said, the ceramic porcelain factories of this time is like the space race. So I thought, oh. So
Oh,
then I thought, well, okay, I want to do a female main character. And I decided to do an artist, someone who'd be painting the porcelain. And I came up with French Huguenot because I hadn't written that, and it is my distant background. I remember I was interviewed once, like, what kind of stories did you hear growing up? I said, please, this is a really long time ago. But I am really interested in it. And so this was kind of an excuse for me to find out about Pierre Billiot and Huguenot life, although in my book it's all set in London and some in France. And so the artist part I also wanted to get into because my father was Wally Billiot was a watercolor landscape artist. So yeah, so I kind of was on one level, I just really wanted to do a spy story. I wanted to jump in, been reading Le Carré and all these other masters, since I was in college. So I wanted to do it in a way that I could, but then I thought I really wanted to explore things about my family and both immediate and hundreds of years ago.
there's so much in there to explore that we mostly don't have time for. But darn, as you were talking, I was thinking I didn't think to ask all of you which came first, plot or character. And that's something we writers talk to each other about a fair amount. So thanks for that, Nancy. And in
Sure.
some ways, I guess your family history and the character comes from your own backyard
Mhm.
too.
Right, right.
Yeah. Eleanor, what about you? How did you create Will Reese?
Well, there were a couple of things. First, hand weaving. Well, I should say it used to be one of my hobbies when I had more time. So I wanted to use that weaving because weaving has been something that people have done for millennia, literally millennia, right up until the Industrial Revolution. It would have had to have been a man because even though women wove then, only men could travel. And then I based Will Reese pretty much on my father. So now you know what my father was like. And I wanted to do, I guess, like the common man, because in a lot of the mysteries with the rich, like Peter Wimsey, they have the time and the luxury of leisure to do whatever they want. Well, regular people don't have that.
Mhm.
You're struggling with making a living, you're struggling with family, you're struggling with all the demands on your time, and then you're still trying to figure out who murdered somebody. So to me, that's one of the things that's very, very interesting is a regular person dealing with all the stuff that all of us have to deal with, really, and then trying to do this extra little bit at the same time. And then I added Lydia because I felt I really wanted to have the female perspective. I didn't want a man who only really would be talking to bricklayers and, masons and that kind of thing. I wanted to have someone who had an entry into the female world for a variety of reasons, many of which I talk about in the books. So, and I didn't want to use somebody famous. I mean, in some ways, being famous and doing all these wonderful things is like their job. And how boring is that after a while?
We can talk about that for quite a while too.
Yeah.
And my characters are everyday people too. And I took on a volunteer gig back in the mid-teens and at my local Morristown National Historical Park where George Washington and his men spent 2 really awful winters. And I bumped into a historian who explained that historians think that 50% or less of the population during the American Revolution supported independence. And this was at the beginning of President Trump's first term, and our country was going through equally harsh divisions. And that intrigued me no end. And I came up with characters who, like some of us, maybe look over their shoulder before expressing an opinion because you don't know who's listening and what they might think. And like Nancy, I always loved spy stories, but Harriet the Spy is probably my favorite. And so I ended up with a spy story with two people who didn't expect to ever have that role. Anyway, Eleanor said that famous people are more boring to write about than everyday people. You know, you didn't really say that, but it leads into the next question. Do you include actual historical characters or actual crimes in your fiction? And does that choice free or restrict the fiction that you write? So Eleanor, I'm going to start with you on that.
The famous people are very tangential. I used archival newspapers quite a bit for research. So I do mention, I mean, George Washington gets mentioned quite a bit, John Jay, and a lot of the things that were happening politically. But because my main character is basically a weaver and a farmer, he is not tied into the powerful. And I don't use real crimes. Sometimes I'm inspired by something I read or have read in one of those old newspapers. But mostly I try to stick to fiction. And one of the problems I see with using a real person is then you really are limited by their biography and what you know they have done. So when I reference George Washington, for example, it's because Will Reese was a Continental soldier and he remembers what it was like to be at Valley Forge, for example. So that's one reason why I opted not to use famous real people.
Chris, what about you?
I love what Eleanor just said. If you're using real people, you're limited by that individual's biography, by their timeline. And for me, it's an awful lot more extra research. So I mention historical events because I want my characters to be real. I want them to read the newspapers. And if you were reading the newspapers at that time, you would know of these things that you'd be talking about these things, just like we read the newspaper, we watch the news, and we talk about that. There's a couple of events that I reference in No Comfort. One of them is the Johnstown flood of 1889. When I was a kid, it terrified me. I remember seeing old newspapers, old photographs in a history book. At that time, I think the Johnstown flood would have been terrorizing people for 10 years later. And in fact, it does, because in the first book, there is a potential flood and people are freaking out. Where do I go? How do I get out of here? What do I need to do? So it ratchets up the tension in your story, but it also makes your characters so much more believable. Another thing that I reference is the Wilmington Massacre in North Carolina. That was 1889, and the Spanish-American War. So lots of men went to the Spanish-American War. They did not come back, and many of them just died of disease instead of, heroic deaths on the battlefield. Another thing that we reference is, or I referenced in Tragedy's Twin, was the disease of tetanus or lockjaw. We don't think about that too much anymore. We have a vaccine for that. It's like, well, I'm not getting lockjaw. What even is that? And in Carrie's time, in 1900, before penicillin, before penicillin, before vaccines, those are real fears that people had. You had to be very careful about what you were doing. You had to make sure everything was, medicine wasn't great. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't what we have now. And so, you know, referencing those old-fashioned diseases, those old-fashioned, the old events that would have happened, I hope to anchor the reader more in that time period. So people know events, yes.
Mm, thanks.
Mhm.
Nancy, I know you have famous people in
I'm the one who
your
puts
book.
all these real people in my books. Yes. In most of them. My first 3 books in Tudor England, I have Henry VIII, Cromwell, 3 of the 6 Wives. Stephen Gardiner is the antagonist of the whole series. And then in my book before the Versailles Formula, The Orchid Hour, set in 1923 New York City, I actually, sounds so nuts, but I actually based the whole book because I used to work at John Jay Criminal Justice College. I'm very interested in the history of the mafia. And I based the whole book on this little nugget that I read on Lucky Luciano's first arrest in Little Italy, which is the little known first arrest. His true name, I found out all about him and his family, Salvatore Lucania. And my main character is a fictional second cousin of his. A widow, a Sicilian American who gets caught up in a speakeasy crime. So the books that I'm doing now, I also have, my main characters are from my imagination, but the people from history play supporting roles. In this one, you will have the most significant real person is Sir Horace Walpole, who wrote the first Gothic novel, Castle of Otranto, and built Strawberry Hill, which is an unbelievable Gothic revival villa outside London. But, you know, and then I have my cameos. I just can't resist when I find out they lived at the same time. Like, I could not resist the Marquis de Sade. I don't have that kind of strength. My book was, when I went to France, there's nothing graphic, but he's there. He has a small role to play. But yes, I have to be very careful because my first 3 books, I did have the real people more. And as I said in an interview recently, I mean, then you're sort of stuck. Like if you're doing something in which Henry VIII marries Catherine Howard, and you need your murder plot to be involved with her downfall. Well, she was married to the man for over a year, and that's very hard for a mystery to sustain. You know, to jump in that amount of time, it's much better if a mystery is shorter. But I would say that my ratio of real to fictional would sort of align with S.J. Shardlake books. Do you know anybody know those? He has Cromwell and real people in them, and the Philip Carr, Bernie Gunther books set in Germany in around World War II. So those main characters are so fictional, and they're both amazing main characters. But then there's like this kaleidoscope of real people, most of them terrible, who influence the crimes. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, first of all, go read The Orchid Hour if you haven't, along with all of Nancy's other books. It's a lot of fun. New York City during Prohibition.
Well, I lived in New York City for a long time, and that book was my sort of love poem to living in the city.
Yeah. So it sounds like real historical characters do restrict your writing, but you can't help yourself.
Have to be careful. Have to be careful. Because otherwise I don't want to change what real people did. I think that's the readers don't like it. It's kind of breaking a pact. And in my book Dreamland, I had to move the burning down of the attraction in Coney Island of Dreamland because it's a summer book and it actually burned down in May. And I was really far into the book and I didn't know what to do about that. And so, because it had to be 1911. I mean, all the writers here know that you get stuck in these little nooks. And so I actually did do it in the author's note. That's the only time that I've changed something. I changed the burning of Dreamland 3 months. I hope everyone will forgive me.
Oh, okay. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that. And Chris, we're going to come back to something you brought up as well. You mentioned how people must have felt about the Johnstown, or you expect people would have felt about the Johnstown flood, about the fear of lockjaw. And that brings up another question, which is how do you keep your characters true to their times, but relatable to ours? Some people, I think George Martin compared historical fiction to writing science fiction
Mhm.
because none of us live on another planet. None of us live in the past. So back to the question, how do you keep your characters true to their times but relatable to ours? And Eleanor, I'll start with you on that.
I agree with that estimate because you're still doing the same kind of world building in a place you've never been, really. But my whole thing is I don't think people change very much. You know, Will Reese has anger issues after the death of his first wife. He's devastated. For a long time, he's estranged from his oldest child, his son. I think all of that is very relatable. Because I don't really think, despite the technology, and if you read the archival newspapers, I think you'll agree, people do the same things over and over and over again. And I see Chris nodding. I think that just because he's dealing with Shakers, which was a commune and a very successful one, you know, it doesn't mean that you don't have a bad apple. And it doesn't mean that he has employment issues when he's trying to find people to work on his farm for him. And he has to deal with money. I mean, all of those are the same kinds of things a person would deal with today. So I don't think that is that difficult a problem if you write about people that you see as real people.
Mm-hmm. It's a great answer. Chris, I think you kind of already answered, but how do you balance historical society's expectations of women in that time with the need for characters to be relatable to the current audience?
When I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about, as I'm writing this, I wrote a character in book 3, Find Your Way to My Grave. And the character was a woman, and she said, "He's not getting my vote." And as I read that in the edits, I'm like, duh.
Oh, no.
She wouldn't have been able to vote anyway.
Mhm.
And so you really have to pay attention to where you are when you've built this world and what women's rights were, especially. We couldn't vote. We couldn't carry bank accounts. You know, there was, everyone knows that women had a very limited or restricted sort of future for themselves. It was house, home, husband, kids, things like that. And that's really a broad spectrum. When you're doing research with historical fiction, you discover there were lots and lots of women undertakers. They were very well qualified. Women did work outside the home. You know, think about all the women who went to work in a factory all day long and then came home and had to deal with their house and their family and their children, putting food on the table. So we kind of forget that women did have such a limited outlook, I guess. But Eleanor's right. There's nothing new here. As a reader is going along, they might say, wow, you know, this person probably does have PTSD, but they didn't call it that. This person is, you know, not, she's very sassy. She's outside of her limitations, but, you know, again, painting it with a broad brush doesn't get us right into where our characters are. It doesn't make our characters lots of fun. If my character is outspoken, I think we kind of take that for granted, but in her time, it would have been like, wow, she's a very outspoken woman. She's not the norm. So there's a lot of relatability simply because we can sort of take advantage of what women have as just normal expectations today.
That's great. And Nancy, speaking of outspoken women, how do you keep Genevieve a woman of her time but relatable to us?
Yes. Well, I based her on some real women artists in the mid to late 18th century who, there's one who was Swiss, Angelica Kaufmann, and one who was French, who came a little later, who painted Marie Antoinette, who was Marie Antoinette's favorite artist. So it did happen, but it was enormously hard. the women were not allowed to be in the art academies of either France or England. They were forbidden. And they could not, in many cases, get the real training and apprenticeships you needed to be an artist. Then you needed an enormous amount of training. And most successful artists went to Italy and looked at the real paintings of the masters of the Renaissance and really studied them for years, you know. So for a woman to become a professional artist, not just watercolor, you know, amusing herself, which a lot did as an accomplishment, but to become a real working artist was very difficult. It was possible. I always think it's funny. One of the reasons they didn't want women to become professional portrait artists, which was a way to get real fame in England and France at that time, was because they felt it was really inappropriate for women to, for long periods of time, be looking at the faces of men they were painting. It was inappropriate. So, you know, there's all these obstacles, and most real women had training from their fathers or brothers to get around this. In the cases that I cited, that's what they did. So I looked at women who read biographies, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art had a great exhibition of Elizabeth Vigée-Brun. So I was able to get some, you know, some architecture for my character.
Oh, I love that phrase. Because we are building our character.
Yeah.
I agree with Eleanor. I think human emotions haven't changed, and
Right.
and that's the infrastructure, of the characters. In my case, Becca and Daniel have both lost people they've loved relatively early. And part of the arc of both their characters over the 3 books is how do you let yourself look forward with hope and connect with new people if you've had significant loss. So that's the emotional end. On the historical end, I was worried about creating a female spy in the 18th century, but it turns out there's a record of quite a few of them, including Patience Wright, who's a Jersey girl like me, well, not quite like me, who's a character in The Paris Mistress. There were women who led food riots, women publishers, women poets in the 18th century. So that gave me some comfort. And then, like all of you, I did research to include some of the limitations in the book to balance. I didn't want Becca to feel too modern. So in the first book, The Turncoat's Widow, when George Washington says, come into this room, the 2 of us need to speak, Becca feels a little queasy because at the time, men and women would not have been alone in a room unless they were married or were family. It would have been absolutely inappropriate not to have a third person there. So those kind of small notes are sprinkled throughout the books. So that's how I handled that question. So much research. What was the most surprising or interesting thing you learned in researching your latest book? Oh, right. We have to start with someone. Let's start with Chris.
I'm sorry. Where did we start with research?
Most interesting.
Yeah, the most interesting. So I'm writing about undertaking in the year 1900. And where do you go for that? Where do you go to find that out? So I love historical newspapers. Thank goodness there's some great databases online. But one of the most favorite things I have is an embalming manual from 1889, complete with pictures, and I read it all the time. Other than that, I found a magazine called Sunnyside. Sunnyside was a professional trade journal because at this time in history, morticians, mortuary schools, mortuary science was becoming a legit business. prior to that, it really wasn't. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, things like that, but not morticians. And so we're right on this cusp of modern mortuary science. And so there's trade magazines, there's manuals, and there are lots and lots of newspaper articles about people going to mortuary school, graduating with degrees in embalming. There is a women's license embalmers association. That was a real thing. And so, of course, my character Carrie Lisbon has her license from the Women's Licensed Embalmers Association. So it's a great deal of fun. I think it's all interesting, but it's a great deal of fun to look into that piece of history for me.
Wow. Chris, what's your favorite online newspaper archive site?
FultonHistory.org. One word, FultonHistory.org.
Okay.
Yep, good stuff.
Thanks.
That's local for me. I'm sorry. That just as a caveat, that's kind of a New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Eastern U.S. database.
Okay. Good information.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, what about you? Most interesting or
Well, I
surprising?
have something that's shocking. For this book, I had to spend the most time in France of any book in the series. And so I really tried to read up on the French aristocracy. This is before the French Revolution. This is during the time of Louis XV, who said, "Après moi le déluge," after me. And he was certainly right. I found out that some of these aristocrats, their lives makes dangerous liaison look like, Sesame Street. I mean, they were very, very, very depraved and pretty evil. I found a real story of the Prince de Lamballe. That name's familiar if you know about the French Revolution. He was the heir to the largest fortune in France. And he was about 17 or 18. And so a duke of a noble house who did not have that kind of fortune befriended him by introducing him to lots of prostitutes and lots of alcohol to debauch him. Now, why? Because the Prince de Lamballe had a sister, the only other person who could inherit this money. And he succeeded. The Prince de Lamballe died, even though he'd married childless before he was 22 years old. And this duke married the sister and inherited the largest fortune in France. So that's nasty. I read that. I was like quite shocked, but maybe it was a good idea to have a French Revolution, eh?
I thought you were going to say maybe that's a good idea for a mystery.
That too.
Eleanor, most surprising or interesting thing you found?
I learned an awful lot about American history that I didn't know throughout the course of researching the Will Rees books. For one thing, I didn't know how partisan the politics have always been, which does give you a certain perspective. But one of the things about researching the Bronze Age Crete mysteries is there are no newspapers, no written record. It's a pre-literate society. So you are really reliant on archaeological excavations. And of course, none of the archaeologists agree with one another. So what I did is I chose the opinion that I either liked the best or that I felt was best for the mystery. But one of the things that I discovered, which I have not included, and I probably won't, is one of the archaeologists really believes that the Minoans, to use the common term, practiced human sacrifice and cannibalism.
Well,
and I don't write that kind of book, so that will probably never appear in any of my Bronze Age Crete mysteries. And of course, I mean, he had a lot of evidence with pictures of cut marks on bones and all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of other archaeologists disagree. So until there's more excavations and we know more, I feel perfectly free to ignore that little piece of information.
That is horrifying. So thank you for that. I love the online National Archives. It is just a treasure trove. And I saw a small mention of something in a great book on Benjamin Franklin. And I went to the National Archives and I found a letter from the middle of the American Revolution that offered Benjamin Franklin an annual pension for life and a peerage if he would just help the British come up with settlement terms for America that kept America part of England. And if Dr. Franklin was interested in this sensible offer, he should come to the Cathedral of Notre Dame on a specific Wednesday in July and look for the man with holding the red rose.
Wow.
And the police, of course, I followed up, and there was a police report. The Paris police went looking for the man with the red rose because Benjamin Franklin was no dope, and he told the authorities about this letter. And they arrested the man with the red rose. But even in Paris, in the years just before the French Revolution, it was not a crime to hold a flower in a church. So they let him go, and he disappeared into history. And that became the basis for the plot of my book. So that was the most surprising thing. We have reached noon, but I just wanted to start taking questions from the audience. But if you'll give us just a few more minutes, I have a lightning round real fast. So for each of you, what one piece of advice would you give to a writer interested in historical mysteries and writing historical mysteries? Just a quick one. Nancy, you first?
Sure. Besides reading a lot of them, I would advise people to watch some really great historical mystery TV series. And my two suggestions are Foyle's War and Brother Cadfael, to get the mix of personal, detection, and historical context, because you have to fit all three into a successful book. And those screenwriters and novelists, in the case of Brother Cadfael, did it great.
Great advice. Eleanor?
I would say that they better enjoy history and research both, because you could be finished, you think, with a book, and you still have to research every little detail, just like Chris was saying. So if you don't enjoy that piece of it, this is not the field for you.
Great advice. Chris?
At least 3 sources. 2 of them should be some kind of archival something, some kind of primary source, some kind of authentic research that's not just Wikipedia, although Wikipedia's got some great sources. So go down the bottom of those entries and click
It does
on
have
those.
good link outs.
Yeah, good link outs. And online newspapers, they're a treasure trove.
And online is great, but if you can actually visit the area that you want to write about, and don't neglect small, quirky museums. Most have gift shops, and most of those gift shops include brochures and booklets by local historians on things that will help make your setting come to life. And finally, what are the 3 of you working on right now? Eleanor?
Well, I just finished the newest Will Reese, which is, as I mentioned, is coming out. So I'm taking a break right now because even though I've written so many of them, you'd think I'd know everything. Believe me, that is not the case.
Nancy?
I'm writing something very gothic. I guess I got into it with this book, and now I'm going even further, and it's part of a group project, but I can't say anything about it. It's very different, and there'll be an announcement like first week in May.
Cool.
Great.
Chris?
I'm working on book 4 of the Carrie Lisbon series. I'm sending Carrie to an Undertakers convention in the year 1901.
Oh, wow. And I'm working on a standalone book that will take place in London in 1772 with an amateur sleuth who's a landlady's daughter.
Maybe our
Anyway.
characters could meet. You're coming in. I'm coming into your time.
Yeah.
And anyway, with that, are there questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. And if you need a minute or two to think of the questions you want to ask, I still have one or two more, I think, that I can ask each of you. And what's the best and the hardest part about writing a mystery series? Because you all write series. Actually, let's change that slightly because we do have a question. What's the most challenging aspect of writing historical fiction? Who wants to take that first?
Well, I have found that things that I find fascinating and engrossing and can go down the rabbit hole of, you wouldn't even believe, are not necessarily of as much interest to readers. And so I have to temper my obsessions, with character and suspense, and just keep a hold of myself.
I agree with that. There's a catchphrase, kill your darlings, and mostly it refers to sentences that are just so beautiful. You've written that are just so beautiful, they take everyone else out of the story, admiring you. But there are historical darlings too, those obsessions
Yes.
Nancy mentioned, and those got to go as well.
I also
Chris?
think that
Oh.
you absolutely have to research everything, because a very minor mistake that your eye passes over 200 times can get into a book, and believe me, the reader will call you on it.
They certainly will. And, we talk about the details and getting them right. And I don't know, there's got to be at least a million details in each every phrases that they say, a milk bottle that they might drink from. I referred to a store bottle. It's something that's very common, but I was like, wait a minute, do they have store bottles in 1900? And I looked and looked and looked and found my 3 references that said, yeah, they had store bottles of milk in the store in 1900. So you spend a lot of time researching. But I think one of the important things is when you're writing the mystery is to get the mystery and the story down and then go back and do the research. But, I think both of them take an equal amount of time.
You have to love historical research.
Yeah.
It's something as simple of, I have a character in a tavern and they pick up a cup of ale. Well, what would the cup have been made out of?
Yeah.
So
And did
you're
they have forks? Were they using forks back then? And what kind of forks?
That was a piece that got cut in my first draft of my first book, because somehow I don't know why it fascinated me that forks then had 2 tines, not 3.
That's
And
right.
my editor said, "Are you crazy?" So that went. But we have another question. Did you pitch your book as a series?
I did.
And Nancy?
The blue was not pitched that way, and it did better than I thought. So I decided to write a second, and then decide one of the reasons I did it this way. My first books, the Joanna Stafford series, I did pitch as a series, and I got a little burned because there was so much turnover at my publisher, and there were so many vagaries in the publishing industry, and it became very hard. Also, my books are not standalone historical crime solving where someone comes in and solves a murder, and you don't really need to have read any of the others. While in my series, it does help, although I try to weave in a lot of information so you could read it as a standalone, but it really helps to read the first and the second before you read the third. And I myself, as a reader, think that's great, but some people I've already seen a little bit of an Amazon. I didn't realize this was the third. So series, I love to read them and I enjoy writing them, but commercially, I have found it's tricky.
Yeah. I know we're getting short on time. Marley asks, readers often wonder what is historically accurate and what is not, but they don't discover that until the author's note at the end. Have you ever considered a way to move the note forward? And I'll answer that because I changed a date in my third book. That's the one time I fiddled with history. And so I share the concern, but I don't want to move my author's note forward because there's too much of the plot in it.
Right.
Right.
And I don't want
Mm.
readers seeing that until they've finished as much of the book as they care to finish. But what do you all think about that?
I agree. I think it's too easy to have spoilers. And if they've finished it, also, I mean, you might be writing about the history, have a murder mystery, and they mention penicillin. And then in your author's note, you have several paragraphs about penicillin. You don't want to put that in the beginning because that's going to tell, them more probably than they want to know before they've even read the story.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but I understand it's a dilemma. If you've changed anything in history, and are you taking readers out of the few readers out of the story who may really know that history,
Mhm.
and they see that you've done something in quotes wrong.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing Marley nod as I say that, and I don't know if there's an answer to that dilemma, but Marley, I may get in touch with you after and see what you think. So we just have a few minutes left.
And we have a drawing,
There
Mally.
you go. And that was there's a drawing, and someone on listening in will win one of each of our books, right?
So what we're doing is we're going to have 4 winners, and each winner will receive one of your books. We're going to spread the wealth. And that was fascinating. From some of the things that are so innocuous for the number of tines in a fork to some of the things we take for granted, such as women's rights. There is so much that all of you have to incorporate in your writing. Thank you so much. That was a fascinating discussion. I expected no less, but it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for, bringing us up together so we can talk about the things that, we love.
It was wonderful. I'm a bit of a history buff, and I graduated as a poli-sci buff, and now that means I'm a history buff. It was so long ago. But what we've done is we've used a random generator for the attendees that are here. So we wanted to not just have people that are registered, but people who came to the program. And we thank you so much for being here today. And I'm going to go in order. How we did this was I basically counted the number of attendees, the number into the random generator, and then went back, and whoever landed on it wins the book. So starting with Chris, we're going to go alphabetically by first name. Chris, Adrian Mathieu won a copy of whichever book your choice for Adrian.
Oh,
Adrian.
wonderful. I want all of them, though. I don't know how I could make that decision.
Why don't we start you with book 1, Adrian?
Okay.
It's called No Comfort for the Undertaker. It's got everything you need in order to jump into the second and third books.
Oh, you are the Victorian. Yes, I'm writing a Victorian historical too, so that sounds perfect.
Yay! Yay!
I'm a
Great.
little bit further up. I'm working on one in 1908. So
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. I love it how it works out that way. So, Eleanor, Haley Sims. Haley's still here?
Thank you. Oh, how wonderful.
Haley's still here. Good.
Still here.
So, Eleanor and Haley, I'm going to connect the two of you together.
Oh,
Mally. can I do the suspenseful with drum roll, please? Hope Hodgkins, you've won Mally's book.
Oh my goodness. And here I'm only a visitor.
Well,
But this was such a
welcome.
wonderful
We're
talk.
happy to have
Thank
you.
you. I'm so enthusiastic. And I haven't read any of those, so I'll look forward to it.
I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks.
And last, but definitely not least, Nancy. Little drum roll here. Can I get some suspense going? I'm just going to make sure. Hold on. I'm making sure that whoever wins is still on the call. Okay, so hold on. Person left. So I'm going to do some other counting because I also wrote the numbers down. John Olson, congratulations. You have won one of Nancy's books. And we will connect you. You're on mute still, John, if you wanted to. And actually, I see there's two people there. So
I'm
if you,
and I write historical fiction, but there's no mysteries. Crimes get committed, but nobody solves them.
So do you want a historical thriller set in early New York City or in 18th century Europe?
New York City.
I will then send you the Orchid Hour.
Okay, wonderful.
Welcome to Prohibition.
Thank you very much.
We should have all of your emails, I believe, in our registration from on our Zoom. And we will connect you with the author that you'll be receiving the book from. And Mally, I don't want to take over from your moderator job. So is there anything else for the four of you? You're all fabulous.
Well, I will add something. We hope you enjoyed the panel. Thank you so much to the panelists and to you for attending. I get to say that if you read any of our books and enjoy them, we hope you'll leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. It helps other readers find our books too. And if you celebrate Easter, have a wonderful Easter, and to everyone a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next month.
Chris, we have to get together at some point because this whole thing, like I have Carol now. We're reading her book in my book discussion group, and then
Yes.
she's